"There's no space for you inside," security said at our annual achievement gala. Through the glass, I saw the person who stole my campaign accepting my award. Even the new hires got seats. I stood there in my carefully chosen dress, a receipt for $430 still in my purse, as Linnea took center stage. My campaign, my idea, my execution, her credit. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside. There are actual guests trying to enter." The security guard's voice carried just loud enough that several colleagues turned to stare. I recognized pity in some faces, amusement in others. 3 months of systematic exclusion, culminating in this public humiliation. "There must be some mistake," I said, fumbling with my phone to show the email invitation. "No mistake. Your name was removed from the list this morning." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched as Linnea accepted the Crystal Trophy for the Authentic Voices campaign. The campaign that had saved our struggling company. The campaign born during my weekend without sleep, when I'd realized that our industry's polished messaging had created a trust deficit. "Our groundbreaking approach showcases real people with real stories," Linnea was saying, her voice crystal clear through the glass. My words. My exact words from the pitch deck. I stepped back from the entrance, dignity somehow intact despite the burning behind my eyes. The security guard had already turned away, dismissing me as irrelevant. Inside, executives clinked champagne glasses, while monitors displayed the faces of people whose stories I had personally collected. People who weren't invited tonight. That's when I knew exactly what to do. I pulled out my phone, opened my contacts, and sent one message. Then I walked to my car, heels clicking against the pavement as I crossed the darkened parking lot. 20 minutes later, my phone exploded with notifications as I sat watching from my car. The chairman emerged from the building, frantically scanning the parking lot. When he spotted my vehicle, he ran toward me. Actually ran, in his $3,000 suit, sweat visible even in the dim light. If you're still with me in this story, I want to thank you for listening. Sometimes we need to hear how others stood up for themselves to find our own courage. If this resonates with you, please like and subscribe for more authentic stories about workplace justice. I'd also love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Now, let me tell you what happened next and how this all began. My name is Everly, and until 3 months ago, I was the marketing director for a health services company that desperately needed a rebrand. I've always been the person who works twice as hard with half the recognition, the one who shows up earlier, stays later, and gets things done without fanfare. When I pitched Authentic Voices, our CEO Camden looked skeptical. "Consumers don't want reality," he said. "They want aspiration." With respect, I countered, research shows the opposite. Trust in polished corporate messaging has plummeted. People crave authenticity. They can detect staged perfection instantly. My proposal was radical. Instead of scripted testimonials with actors, we would feature real clients telling their own stories in their own words. No scripts, no rehearsals, just truth that might be messy, but would be genuine. Camden reluctantly approved a pilot, expecting failure. I worked around the clock, personally interviewing nearly 100 clients. Not all were articulate, not all were photogenic, but all had stories that mattered. The first video featured Dario, an elderly man with Parkinson's. His hands trembled as he described how our therapy services helped him hold his newborn grandchild. We filmed in his modest living room. His emotion was raw, his gratitude genuine. The response was immediate. Engagement quadrupled across platforms. Real people commented with their own experiences. For the first time, our brand was part of authentic conversation rather than shouting into the void. 8 more videos followed. A teenage girl with social anxiety, a teacher whose classroom used our sensory tools, a veteran regaining independence. None were polished, all were powerful. "This is working beyond our expectations," Camden admitted during our quarterly review. "The board is impressed." That's when Linnea entered the picture. She transferred from our West Coast office, hired directly by Camden as Executive Strategic Director, a title created just for her. At first, I welcomed the support. With 3 years at a prestigious firm and a Harvard MBA, Linnea seemed like a valuable ally. "I'm so impressed with what you've created," she gushed during our first meeting. "I'd love to learn your approach." I shared everything: my research, my interview techniques, the raw footage that didn't make the final cuts, I explained why certain stories resonated more than others. 3 weeks later, I was removed from the meeting invite about the campaign's next phase. Administrative oversight, Linnea assured me when I asked. I'll forward you the notes. The notes never came. Neither did invitations to subsequent meetings. When I encountered our videographer in the hallway and asked about the next shoot, his uncomfortable expression told me everything. Linnea's handling those now, he admitted. Different direction, I guess. I scheduled time with Camden, waiting 2 weeks for a 15-minute slot. I'm concerned about being excluded from my own campaign, I said directly. Camden sighed, not meeting my eyes. Everly, we appreciate your initial concept, but the board feels we need more polish for nationwide expansion. Linnea brings experience scaling campaigns like this, but polish defeats the entire purpose. The authenticity is why it's working. We need to elevate the messaging. Linnea suggested using trained spokespeople who can articulate our values more clearly. You mean actors? I said flatly. Professional communicators, he corrected. Look, you'll still get credit for the original concept. That was a lie. Within weeks, marketing materials referred to Linnea as the creator of the Authentic Voices campaign. Press releases quoted her vision. Industry publications interviewed her about her groundbreaking approach. When our campaign was nominated for the Industry Innovation Award, the submission listed Linnea as the lead. My name appeared nowhere. I documented everything, saved emails, recorded conversations where legal, kept original drafts with my comments and timestamp. Not because I planned revenge, but because women in corporate America learned to keep receipts. The night of the gala, watching through the window as Linnea gushed about authenticity while accepting my award, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about credit. It was about the real people whose stories had been replaced with polished fakes. My message wasn't to executives or HR. It was a group text to all 50 people who had shared their stories for the original campaign. They're celebrating our campaign tonight without inviting any of you. They've replaced your stories with actors. I'm sorry I let this happen. I included side-by-side images, their authentic videos versus the new polished versions with professional storytellers. I added screenshots of the original release with my name and the new materials crediting Linnea. Then I drove to the far corner of the parking lot and waited. Within minutes, those genuine voices began doing what genuine voices do best, speaking truth. The first post came from Dario, the elderly man with Parkinson's. He shared the glossy commercial featuring an actor who looked nothing like him alongside his original raw interview. This company erased me after using my story. The real me wasn't polished enough for their fancy awards ceremony. His post caught fire immediately. Then came Yara, the teenage girl with social anxiety. They filmed me for hours, promised my story would help others like me. Now they've replaced me with someone prettier, more articulate. But she's not real. She's not me. One by one, the authentic voices I had amplified discovered they'd been silenced and replaced. Their collective response became deafening. As I sat in my car, notifications flooded my phone. Some tagged our company directly. Others contacted journalists who had covered our campaign. A few took screenshots of Camden's previous statements about honest storytelling alongside pictures of the actors who had replaced them. That's when I saw him, Camden bursting through the gala doors, phone pressed to his ear, scanning the parking lot. When he spotted my car, he broke into a run. I considered driving away but decided against it. This confrontation was inevitable. He reached my window, breathing heavily. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. What have you done? His voice cracked with panic, rather than anger. I rolled down my window. I haven't done anything except tell the truth. They're destroying us online. The journalists inside are all leaving to cover this instead of our award. Investors are texting me. You need to make it stop. How would I do that? Ask 50 people who were exploited and then discarded to stay quiet about it? That's not how authenticity works, Camden. He ran his hand through his graying hair. Look, I understand you're upset about credit. This isn't about credit, I interrupted. This is about integrity. You took a campaign about honesty and authenticity and filled it with lies. What did you expect would happen? Camden glanced back at the building. Through the glass, I could see commotion inside. Executives huddled around phones. Several people were heading toward the exits. We can fix this, he said, desperation edging his voice. We'll acknowledge your contribution publicly. Restore your title. double your salary. And what about them? The real people whose stories made this campaign successful in the first place? The ones you replaced with professional communicators? He waved dismissively. We'll figure something out. Make donations to their causes or whatever. Just tell me what it will take to make this go away. His response crystallized everything. Camden still didn't understand that authenticity wasn't something you could buy or fake. Nothing will make this go away, I said. That's what happens with truth. It stays. But I'll come inside to help manage this on one condition. Name it, he said quickly. You immediately announce that the campaign is returning to its original vision. No more actors. The real people with real stories get reinstated. Camden hesitated, calculating the costs. That would mean scrapping millions in production, which will be nothing compared to what you'll lose if you don't. Your choice. As we walked back toward the building, my phone buzzed with a text from Mira, the nursing home director whose tearful testimony had been replaced by a former soap opera actress. They didn't think we were good enough to tell our own stories, but we're good enough to tell the truth about them. Inside, the atmosphere had transformed from celebration to crisis management. Linnea stood at the center of a group of executives, her face flushed with anger as she gestured at her phone. You, she spat when she saw me. Do you have any idea what you've done? We worked for months to elevate this campaign. Elevate? I echoed. You mean sanitize. Strip away everything that made it powerful. We made it marketable, she snapped. Those rambling interviews were never going to scale nationally. Those rambling interviews tripled engagement and saved this company, I countered. And now the people you erased are showing everyone the difference between authentic voices and manufactured ones. Camden stepped between us. Enough. We need solutions, not arguments. Linnea thrust her phone forward. It's too late for solutions. Look at this. On her screen was a side-by-side comparison video that had already accumulated thousands of shares. On one side, Jessie, a mother whose child had benefited from our services, speaking from her heart about her struggles. On the other, the polished actress who had replaced her, reciting nearly identical lines but with perfect hair, perfect lighting, and not a single genuine emotion. The comments were brutal. Corporate fakery exposed. They preach authenticity while erasing real people. Hypocrites. Camden's phone rang. He stepped away to answer, his shoulders tensing as he listened. When he returned, his face had lost all color. That was the chairman. The board is convening an emergency meeting in the morning. He looked at me. They want you there. Why? I asked. Because somehow you've created both the problem and the only potential solution. Linnea's perfectly composed facade finally cracked. This is absurd. She sabotaged our campaign out of jealousy. And you're rewarding her? I told the truth. I corrected. The only sabotage happened when you replaced authentic stories with fakes, while still calling the campaign Authentic Voices. Camden's expression turned calculating. Perhaps we can spin this. A planned reveal, showing the contrast between raw and refined messaging as part of a larger conversation about representation in media. The suggestion was so cynical, it momentarily stunned me into silence. He was still looking for an angle, a way to manipulate rather than change. You still don't get it, I finally said. You can't spin authenticity. It either is or it isn't. Before Camden could respond, a woman I didn't recognize approached our group. She held up a press badge. Fiona Keller, Business Insider. I'd like to speak with whoever can explain why your company replaced real client testimonials with actors while claiming to champion authenticity. Camden stepped forward with a practiced smile. There seems to be some confusion. We've always valued authentic storytelling. I created the original campaign, I interrupted, extending my hand to Fiona. And I'd be happy to explain exactly what happened. The look Camden gave me could have frozen fire. But we both knew he couldn't stop me without making everything worse. I'll need statements from both of you, Fiona said, looking between us. And I'm interviewing Dario Singh tomorrow morning. He's quite eager to share his experience. Dario? Camden asked, confusion evident. The elderly gentleman with Parkinson's from your original campaign, I explained. The one whose story about holding his grandchild moved thousands to engage with our brand. The one you replaced with a silver-haired model who could hold a coffee cup without trembling. Recognition dawned on Camden's face, followed quickly by alarm. I could almost see him calculating the optics of a vulnerable elderly man, telling the world how a corporation had deemed his genuine struggle too messy for their polished image. We seem to have made a significant misstep, Camden conceded, his tone shifting to damage control, which we're committed to rectifying immediately. He turned to me. Everly, perhaps you could help us reconnect with the original participants? The request was both an olive branch and a trap. He wanted to use my relationships with these people to contain the damage. They're already connected, with each other, I said. What started as my marketing campaign has become their community. They're talking, sharing, organizing. As if on cue, my phone lit up with another notification. A live stream had started, featuring 7 of the original participants, discussing how corporations co-opt authentic experiences. 20,000 viewers and climbing. You need to shut this down, Linnea hissed. I couldn't if I wanted to, I replied honestly. And I don't want to. This is what real authenticity looks like. Messy, uncontrolled, and true. Fiona observed our exchange with interest. I'd like to include that perspective in my article, if you're willing to go on record. Before I could answer, the emergency exit doors burst open. The chairman himself, Victor, had arrived. At 73, he rarely attended events like this, preferring to maintain his enigmatic presence from a distance. Victor surveyed the chaos of the gala. Executives huddled in crisis mode, journalists abandoning the official program to follow the unfolding story, the award sitting abandoned on the podium. His gaze finally landed on me. You, he said simply. My office. Now. As Victor turned to leave, expecting me to follow, Camden grabbed my arm. Be very careful, he warned in a low voice. Victor built this company from nothing. He won't tolerate anyone threatening it. I gently removed his hand. I'm not threatening the company. I'm saving its soul. Following Victor through the confused crowd, I noticed something unexpected. Employees, junior staff, assistants, people who normally blended into the background, were watching me. Not with judgment, but with something that looked remarkably like respect. The elevator ride to Victor's top-floor office was silent. I had never been in his private sanctuary before. Few had. What awaited me there would either end my career forever or transform it in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Victor's office occupied the entire top floor of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city's nightscape, a perfect backdrop for power. The space itself was surprisingly austere. No flashy artwork or imposing desk, just simple, quality furnishings that whispered rather than shouted wealth. The man himself stood with his back to me, hands clasped behind him as he gazed at the skyline. 37 years, he said without turning. That's how long I've built this company. Survived 3 recessions, 2 market crashes, and countless competitors trying to put us out of business. He finally faced me, and in one evening, a text message from you has created more damage than any of those things. His tone wasn't angry. It was evaluative. The damage wasn't caused by my message, I replied. It was caused by replacing authenticity with fakery, while still calling it authentic voices. Victor's eyebrow raised slightly. Most employees wouldn't dare speak to him so directly. Sit, he said, indicating a chair across from his. I did, keeping my back straight, hands folded in my lap. Victor remained standing. You understand I could fire you right now, he stated. Yes, and ensure you never work in this industry again. Probably. Yet you don't seem afraid. I considered this. I'm terrified, but not of losing my job. I'm afraid of what happens when companies like ours convince people that polished lies are better than messy truths. We had something real and powerful, and we threw it away for… What? An award? A cleaner aesthetic? Victor studied me with unnerving intensity. What exactly did you hope to accomplish tonight? Justice, I answered honestly. Not just for me, but for the real people whose stories created the success that others are now claiming credit for. Victor moved to the window again, his reflection visible in the glass. For a man in his 70s, he carried himself with remarkable energy. Your campaign, he said slowly, was the most successful initiative this company has launched in 15 years. I blinked, surprised by this acknowledgement. Not Linnea's campaign. A brief smile touched his lips. I've been in business long enough to recognize the difference between creators and climbers. Camden brought Linnea in because your approach made him nervous. Too unpredictable. Too honest. You knew? Victor turned. I read every report, watch every campaign. Did you think I wouldn't notice when the genuine emotion that characterized your work suddenly transformed into polished performances? Or when your name disappeared from the materials? If you noticed, why didn't you stop it? Because business isn't fair, Everly. I wanted to see what you would do about it. The realization hit me. This had been a test, one that most women in corporate America would recognize. Stay quiet and get overlooked, or speak up and get labeled difficult. So tonight was my evaluation, I said, anger finally seeping into my voice. And what about the real people who shared their stories? Were they just pawns in your corporate chess game? Victor's expression hardened. Mind your tone. No, I said, standing up. You just admitted you watched while my work was stolen, and real people were exploited and discarded. You could have stepped in at any point. You chose not to. We stood facing each other, the power dynamic momentarily forgotten in the raw honesty of the moment. You're right, Victor finally said. I could have intervened. Perhaps I should have. But then I never would have seen what you're truly capable of, which is creating a movement that can't be controlled by corporate interests. Not even mine. Do you know what's happening right now? Those 50 people you connected are organizing. They're sharing more than just their stories about our company. They're validating each other's experiences across the board. He picked up a tablet from the side table and handed it to me. On screen was a rapidly growing online community called Authentic Voices, already thousands strong. The description read, real stories, real people, no filters, no corporate editing. You've created something far beyond a marketing campaign, Victor said. Something I couldn't buy with all the resources of this company. I handed the tablet back, confused about where this conversation was heading. So, am I fired or not? Victor laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe appearance. Fired? Quite the opposite. I want to offer you a new position. I don't understand. Camden clearly can't recognize the value of authenticity, or he wouldn't have allowed your work to be diluted. Linnea sees authenticity as something to be manufactured rather than nurtured. Both approaches miss the point entirely. He walked to his desk and pressed a button. A screen descended from the ceiling, displaying financial charts. Our stock is already responding to tonight's events. Analysts are calling it a transparency crisis. By morning, we could lose millions in market value. I'm sorry, I said automatically. Don't be. This company needed a wake-up call. We've grown too comfortable with controlled messaging, too afraid of genuine human connection with all its messiness and unpredictability. He turned back to me. I'm creating a new division within the company. Authentic engagement. Independent from marketing. Direct report to me. I want you to lead it. The offer was so unexpected I couldn't immediately respond. Why would you trust me after I essentially created a PR crisis? Because you did it out of principle, not malice. Because you understand something Camden and Linnea never will, that in a world drowning in polished content, real authenticity is the only thing that truly breaks through. My mind raced. Was this another corporate trap? A way to contain the damage by bringing me back into the fold? What exactly would this division do? I asked cautiously. Whatever you think it should, with one condition. You find a way to make things right with the 50 people whose stories were exploited. And Linnea? Camden? Victor's expression turned grim. That's being handled separately. Before I could press for details, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and sighed. The board meeting has been moved up. They're assembling now. Tonight? Crisis management. I need your answer before I go in. The practical side of me calculated the advantages of the offer. A director-level position, autonomy, vindication. But something felt wrong. What if I don't want to come back? What if the damage to trust is too great? Victor considered this. Then we lose one of our most valuable assets. And rightly so. Companies that can't retain principled people don't deserve them. The sincerity in his voice surprised me. I need time to think, I said, and to talk to the people whose stories started all this. Fair enough, but I need something to tell the board tonight. I took a deep breath. Tell them I'll consider returning under certain conditions. A public acknowledgement of what happened, reinstatement of the original campaign participants with fair compensation, and complete transparency about the mistakes made. Victor nodded slowly. Reasonable terms. Though some board members will resist the public acknowledgement, then they haven't learned anything from this. A ghost of a smile touched his face. Indeed. As we headed to the door, Victor paused. One question. How did you know those 50 people would respond so powerfully to your message? Because they're genuine. When you connect real people around authentic experiences, they don't need scripts or direction. They already know exactly what to say. The board meeting was tense but productive. Victor, true to his word, presented my conditions without dilution. Several board members objected, particularly to the public acknowledgement portion. We can handle this internally, one insisted. Public admission creates unnecessary liability. Unnecessary for whom? I countered. The entire campaign was built on transparency and authenticity. Handling this behind closed doors contradicts everything we claim to value. After 3 hours of debate, they agreed to my terms, though not without resistance. By morning, our company would issue a statement acknowledging the replacement of real participants with actors and apologizing for the misrepresentation. The original 50 people would be invited back, compensated fairly, and given creative control over how their stories were shared. As for leadership changes, Camden was reassigned to a different division. Linnea resigned before she could be fired, though industry rumors suggest she struggled to find equivalent work afterward. The marketing team was restructured under new leadership that reported directly to my new division. The most remarkable outcome wasn't corporate at all. The Authentic Voices community that formed that night continued to grow. What began as my marketing concept evolved into something I could never have planned, a self-sustaining network of people supporting each other through shared experiences. 6 months later, I stood on a different stage at a different event. No crystal trophies or champagne flutes here, just real people gathered in an ordinary community center. When I first interviewed all of you for a marketing campaign, I thought I was creating content, I told the group. What I didn't realize was that I was actually building a community. You didn't need me or any company to validate your stories. You just needed to be connected to each other. Dario approached the microphone, his hands still trembling but his voice steady. We may not be polished, but we're real, and that's something no corporate decision can ever take away from us. As I watched the room full of authentic voices, some speaking eloquently, others stumbling over words, all genuine, I realized that my revenge hadn't simply been exposing the lies. It had been revealing a more powerful truth. Authenticity can't be scripted, stolen, or silenced. Sometimes the most revolutionary act in a world of corporate calculation is simply telling the truth and letting it spread on its own. The Authentic Voices community eventually became its own nonprofit entity, independent from any corporate control. I remained involved as an advisor while continuing to transform my company's approach to genuine engagement. The original campaign that had been sanitized was restored to its raw authenticity and became case study material for marketing ethics courses. The chairman, Victor, often says that the most valuable crisis in the company's history was the one I created. It forced us to decide what kind of company we truly wanted to be. He tells new hires, one that presents polished illusions, or one that embraces authentic reality, even when it's messy. As for me, I learned that the most effective revenge isn't about destruction at all. It's about creation, building something so genuinely valuable that those who once dismissed you are forced to recognize what they lost. In a world obsessed with perfection, authenticity remains the one thing that cannot be convincingly faked, and therefore, the one thing truly worth fighting for. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more narratives about finding power in authenticity. Share your own experiences in the comments below. After all, your authentic voice matters too. The calendar notification chimed softly. Quarterly review with Edwin, 3:30 p.m., 2 hours away. Plenty of time to finish my lunch and prepare. I stabbed at my salad, mind already rehearsing talking points for my projects. Harper. I looked up to see Edwin standing over my desk, his expression unreadable. The office hummed with afternoon activity around us. The Diamante group is here. Conference room A now. My fork clattered against the plastic container. Diamante? That's scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. Plans change. He checked his watch. You have 2 minutes to get downstairs. But the presentation isn't finalized. The deck isn't. 2 minutes, Harper. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Don't keep them waiting. As he strode away, the realization hit me. This was deliberate. The Diamante Group represented our biggest potential client of the year, a 10 million account I'd been cultivating for months. Tomorrow's presentation was supposed to be my crowning achievement. My stomach tightened as I grabbed my phone. My laptop was running a system update and wouldn't be ready in time. The printed materials were still at the print shop for tomorrow. The prototype wasn't assembled. In the elevator, I tried accessing my files remotely, but our company's security protocols blocked cloud access from mobile devices. Perfect. When the doors opened, I saw them through the glass walls of the conference room. 6 impeccably dressed executives seated around the table, some checking watches, others scrolling through phones. At the head of the table sat Vivian Diamante herself, rarely present at initial pitches. Edwin intercepted me in the hallway. "Ah, here she is, our team lead." "Where's the presentation?" he whispered harshly. "On my desktop, where it's supposed to be for tomorrow's meeting." "Well, that's unfortunate." He adjusted his tie. "Don't embarrass us." As we entered, Edwin transformed. "Everyone, this is Harper, who'll be walking you through our proposal today. So sorry about the confusion with scheduling." Vivian Diamante looked up, her expression cold. "We were told everything was ready. We've flown people in specifically for this presentation." "Just some minor confusion," Edwin assured her. "Harper is fully prepared." I watched Edwin position himself near the door as he made introductions, close enough to claim credit if things went well, far enough to distance himself when they inevitably crashed. 6 pairs of eyes turned expectantly toward me. I had nothing. No slides, no materials, no prototype, just a phone with dead-end access to our servers, and a brain racing to find a way out of this trap. "Thank you for making time today," I began, trying to steady my voice while my career crumbled in real time. "Before I begin, I'd like to understand something. What's the primary challenge you're hoping our solution will address?" The room fell silent. Vivian exchanged glances with her CFO. "We covered this extensively in our preliminary discussions," he said. "Sometimes restating the problem reveals new insights," I replied, buying seconds to think. What if we've been approaching this from the wrong angle? I had nothing to lose. Edwin had already destroyed me. If you're enjoying this story of workplace betrayal and wondering how Harper will navigate this impossible situation, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories that explore the depths of human relationships and resilience. Your support helps bring these stories to life. My name is Harper Wade, and until that ambush meeting, I was the rising star at Crescent Analytics. 5 years of 60-hour weeks had earned me the lead position on our biggest accounts. My colleagues called me the problem solver, not for following playbooks, but for seeing solutions nobody else could. Edwin Palmer had been my boss for 11 months. He'd transferred from another division after their department collapsed. The rumors suggested mismanagement, but officially, it was restructuring. From day one, he'd viewed me with suspicion. "You work very independently," he'd observed during our first one-on-one. Not a compliment. I'd built my reputation by challenging conventional approaches, which clients loved but made traditional managers like Edwin nervous. He preferred predictability over innovation. 3 weeks before the Diamante ambush, I'd questioned his strategy during our executive briefing. Our team had lost 2 major accounts following his streamlined approach, a paint-by-numbers sales technique that ignored client-specific needs. "We need to adapt our solutions to each client, not force them into our template," I'd argued, presenting data showing declining satisfaction scores. Edwin had smiled tightly. "Thank you for your input, Harper. Let's discuss this offline." We never did. Instead, I was excluded from strategy meetings. My emails went unanswered. Projects were reassigned without explanation. Then came the Diamante opportunity, a potential 10 million contract with the country's fastest-growing retail analytics firm, our biggest prospect in years. "I want you to lead this one," Edwin had announced, surprising everyone. Full creative control. I'd thrown myself into the project, developing a customized solution that addressed their unique market challenges. For 6 weeks, I'd refined, tested, and perfected every detail. The presentation was scheduled for tomorrow, Friday, at 3 p.m., and now here I was, standing empty-handed before the decision-makers, with Edwin watching me drown. "Miss Wade?" Vivian prompted. "We were expecting a demonstration of your analytics platform." I made a split-second decision. Before showing our solution, I'd like to challenge some assumptions. "May I?" Curiosity flickered across Vivian's face. She nodded. "You've met with 6 firms before us, correct?" I asked. 7. she corrected. And they all propose dashboards and visualization tools for your international market data? Her CFO leaned forward. How did you know that? I hadn't. It was an educated guess based on industry trends. Because they're solving the wrong problem. Edwin shifted uncomfortably by the door. This wasn't the apology and rescheduling he'd expected. Your company isn't struggling with data visualization, I continued. You have talented analysts. What you lack is predictive modeling for emerging markets, where consumer behavior doesn't follow established patterns. Vivian's eyebrows raised slightly. I'd struck a nerve. For the next 15 minutes, I asked questions that revealed gaps in their current approach. With each exchange, they became more engaged while Edwin grew increasingly agitated. Perhaps we should reschedule, he interrupted, since Harper doesn't have her materials ready. Actually, Vivian said, this discussion is more valuable than another slide deck. Please continue, Harper. I sketched a basic framework on the notepad before me, explaining how our approach would differ from competitors. I was rebuilding my entire presentation from memory, adapting it to their responses in real time. 30 minutes in, Vivian stood up. The room fell silent. This meeting has taken an unexpected turn, she said. Edwin stepped forward, ready to apologize for my failure. We came expecting a conventional presentation, Vivian continued. Instead, Miss Wade has identified problems we haven't acknowledged ourselves. She turned to me. We need to continue this conversation, but not with your company. Edwin froze. I'd like to meet with you privately, she said, handing me her card. Call my assistant to arrange a time. As they filed out, Edwin's expression transformed from confusion to rage. He'd orchestrated my public failure, but somehow I'd turned it into something else entirely. The door closed behind the Diamante team. What did you do? Edwin demanded. My job, I replied. You've just cost us a 10 million account. Have I? I slipped Vivian's card into my pocket. Or have you? His eyes narrowed. This isn't over, Harper. I had no idea how right he was, or how far he would go to ensure I never succeeded again. Because what happened next would change everything, and no one, especially not Edwin, would see it coming. The elevator ride back to our floor stretched into eternity. Edwin stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, radiating fury. The moment we stepped out, he grabbed my arm. My office, now. Staff members glanced up from their desks as he marched me through the open workspace. Nobody made eye contact. They knew what was coming. Edwin closed his door with controlled precision. Explain yourself. I adapted to the situation you created, I said, keeping my voice level. Would you have preferred I tell them you deliberately sabotaged the presentation? Sabotaged? He laughed. Plans change in business. Being adaptable is part of the job. Is that what happened? Plans changed? He leaned against his desk. The meeting was moved up. I informed you as soon as I knew. And yet everyone else was conveniently unavailable to help present. Are you accusing me of something, Harper? The question hung between us. We both knew the truth, but saying it aloud would cross a line I couldn't return from. No, I finally said. I'm just clarifying the situation. Good, because what I saw today was insubordination. You went completely off script. There was no script. You made sure of that. His expression hardened. You've been building your own personal relationship with the client instead of representing the company. That stops now. He opened his laptop. I'll be handling all communication with the Diamante group moving forward. Vivian specifically asked to speak with me. Vivian will be speaking with our team, which I lead. He glanced up. Unless you're planning to take the client with you? Is that your game here? The accusation stunned me. No, I've always been loyal to this company. Then prove it. Forward me any communication you receive from them and copy me on all responses. That's an order, Harper. He returned to his screen. That's all. I left his office knowing something fundamental had shifted. The rules had changed, but only for me. Back at my desk, I found an email from Edwin, sent during our conversation. It was addressed to the entire department. Team, due to recent concerns, all client communications must now be approved through proper channels. Individual team members should not make promises or suggestions to clients without management review. Additionally, all new business development will now require team approach rather than individual leadership. These changes take effect immediately. Edwin Palmer, Senior Director. The message was clear. My wings were being clipped. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe in accounting. Lunch tomorrow? Need to talk. Important. Zoe and I had started at the company on the same day 5 years ago. While I'd climbed the analyst track, she'd moved into finance. We'd remained friends despite working in different departments. I texted back, Noon. The place with the good soup? Perfect, she replied. As I packed up for the day, my phone chimed with an email notification. Vivian Diamante's assistant. Miss Wade, Miss Diamante would like to meet Tuesday at 9 a.m. at our downtown office. Please confirm your availability. Lindsay Chen, executive assistant to Vivian Diamante. I stared at my phone, torn between professional opportunity and Edwin's direct order. Before I could decide, another email arrived. From Edwin, Harper, I've been informed that several of your projects require immediate restructuring. Please prepare transition documents for the following accounts by Monday morning. He listed every major client in my portfolio. 5 accounts I'd built from nothing, representing thousands of hours of work. He was stripping me bare. The choice became clear. I forwarded Vivian's email to Edwin with a brief note. As instructed, sharing client communication for your review. His response came within seconds. I'll handle this. Do not reply. 20 minutes later, I received another email from Vivian's assistant. Miss Wade, we haven't received confirmation for Tuesday's meeting. Please advise if this time works for you. Lindsay Chen. Edwin was ignoring them. I closed my laptop and headed home, knowing tomorrow would bring new battles. The following day, Zoe was already waiting when I arrived at the cafe. Her expression told me this wasn't a casual lunch. They're watching your emails, she said without preamble. Edwin requested it access yesterday afternoon. Can he do that? Technically, yes, with cause. He cited business continuity concerns. She lowered her voice. There's more. Finance was asked to prepare a severance package calculation. My soup suddenly lost its appeal. For me? She nodded. The request came in this morning. They're building a case, Harper. For what? I haven't done anything wrong. It doesn't matter. Edwin's connected. His brother-in-law plays golf with the CEO. I pushed my bowl away. So, I'm just supposed to wait for the axe to fall? No, you're supposed to be careful. She slid a small flash drive across the table. Your performance reviews for the past 5 years. Client testimonials. Revenue reports showing your contribution. Take it. Where did you get these? I have finance system access. These are all documents you're entitled to have anyway. She checked her watch. I should get back. As she stood, I caught her wrist. Why are you helping me? Zoe's expression softened. Remember when I nearly quit after the Brandon incident? You were the only one who believed me. Some of us haven't forgotten. The Brandon incident. 2 years ago, our former sales director had sexually harassed Zoe at a company retreat. When she reported it, management had suggested she was misinterpreting friendly behavior. I'd gone directly to HR with supporting evidence from other witnesses. Brandon was eventually removed, but not before Zoe endured months of subtle retaliation. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. Just be smarter than they expect you to be. Back at the office, a meeting invitation appeared on my calendar. Performance review, Monday 8 a.m., 3 days from now. No agenda attached. That afternoon, I noticed Edwin in a closed-door meeting with Trent from legal. Through the glass walls, their expressions looked grave. When Trent noticed me watching, he quickly closed the blinds. They were accelerating the timeline. I wouldn't make it to Monday. I needed to act, but carefully. That evening, I created a personal email account and sent a message to Lindsay Chen from it. Miss Chen, due to a potential conflict of interest, I need to discuss something important with Miss Diamante privately. Could you please forward her my personal contact information? Harper Wade. Within an hour, my phone rang, an unknown number. This is Harper, I answered. Miss Wade, this is Vivian Diamante. My assistant shared your message. What's this about a conflict of interest? I took a deep breath. I appreciate you calling personally. I'm in a complicated situation at my company following our meeting. Explain. The presentation you attended was supposed to happen tomorrow. I was given 2 minutes notice deliberately, with no access to materials. By whom? My direct superior, Edwin Palmer. He's now blocked all communication between us and is monitoring my company email. I believe he's building a case for my termination. Silence stretched across the line. And why are you telling me this? Because you asked to meet with me, and I wanted to explain why I couldn't respond properly. I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you deserved to know the truth. Another long pause. The proposal you sketched yesterday, was that your work? Yes, I've been developing it for 6 weeks. And the approach you outlined, predicting consumer behavior in emerging markets using cultural context models, whose idea was that? Mine. It's based on research I've been conducting independently. I see. Her tone revealed nothing. Miss Wade, are you free tomorrow morning? 7 a.m.? At the Riverside Cafe on Oakwood Street? Yes, I can be there. Good. Come alone, and bring nothing from your current employer. We'll talk then. The line went dead before I could respond. I slept poorly that night, torn between hope and dread. By 6:30 the next morning, I was sitting in my car outside the cafe, watching rain streak down the windshield. My future hinged on whatever happened next. The cafe was nearly empty when I entered. Vivian sat in a corner booth, dressed impeccably despite the early hour. No assistant, no team members, just her. "Thank you for coming," she said as I slid into the booth. "Coffee?" I nodded, and she signaled the server. "I've been in business for 27 years, Vivian began. "In that time, I've learned to recognize certain patterns. What happened in that conference room wasn't just about a rescheduled meeting. No, it wasn't. Tell me why you think Edwin Palmer wanted you to fail." I considered my words carefully. 3 weeks ago, I challenged his strategy during an executive briefing. We'd lost 2 major accounts following his standardized approach. I presented data showing we needed more customized solutions. And he didn't appreciate the criticism. No, especially not from someone who... From someone who what? From someone who reminds him of his previous failure. Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Before joining our division, Edwin ran the Midwest office. They lost several major clients under his leadership, and the division was eventually dissolved. The official story was restructuring, but the truth was incompetence, she finished. "I know. We were one of those clients." I nearly choked on my coffee. "You worked with Edwin before?" "Unfortunately, his rigid approach cost us months of market positioning. We terminated the contract early." She studied me. "Did you know this?" "No, that information wasn't shared with the team." She nodded slowly. "So Edwin saw the Diamante name on the prospective client list and recognized a threat. Then you were assigned to lead the presentation." "It felt like a setup from the beginning," I admitted. "Too good to be true." "It was." Vivian placed a folder on the table. "Harper, I didn't come here just to discuss Edwin Palmer. I have a proposition for you." She opened the folder, revealing a document with a familiar logo, but not my company's. It was Diamante's. "What is this?" I asked, heart racing. "Your future," Vivian said, "if you want it." The folder contained an employment contract. Director of Strategic Solutions at Diamante Group, with a salary nearly double what I was making. "I don't understand," I said, scanning the document. "You want to hire me? Based on a 15-minute conversation and some notes on a legal pad?" "Based on what those 15 minutes revealed about how you think," Vivian corrected. "Anyone can make pretty slides. Few can identify the real problem beneath the stated one." I closed the folder. "I can't just walk away from my company." "Why not? You said yourself they're building a case against you." "It's more complicated than that." Vivian studied me. "You're loyal, admirable, but occasionally misplaced." She checked her watch. "I don't need an answer today. Think it over." "If I did accept," I said carefully, "when would you want me to start?" "Immediately. We're presenting to international partners next month. I want your approach incorporated." The implications were clear. I would need to leave my current position with no transition period, walk away from clients I'd built relationships with for years, abandon projects mid-development. It felt wrong, yet staying seemed impossible. "I need a few days," I said finally. "You have until Monday, 9 a.m. Vivian handed me her card with a direct number written on the back. "Call me when you decide. And Harper, whatever you choose, be careful." I spent Saturday weighing my options, making lists of pros and cons that all pointed to the same conclusion. Taking Vivian's offer was the only rational choice. By Sunday afternoon, my decision was made. Monday morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. I dressed professionally, not for the performance review scheduled with Edwin, but for what would come after. The office was quiet when I arrived at 7:30. I used those empty minutes to collect personal items from my desk, leaving company property untouched. At 7:55, I headed to Edwin's office. He was already waiting, alongside Trent from legal. "Close the door," Edwin said without greeting. I remained standing. "What's this about?" "Sit down, Harper." Edwin's tone was cold. "We need to discuss some concerning behavior." Edwin's tone was cold. I stayed on my feet. "Such as?" Edwin opened a folder, similar to Vivian's, but containing something very different. "We have evidence you've been communicating with clients outside proper channels, undermining company directives, and possibly preparing to appropriate client relationships for personal gain. That's absurd." "Is it?" He slid a paper across the desk. "This is an email exchange between you and Vivian Diamante, using a personal account to circumvent company systems. My single message to Lindsay, Vivian's assistant, Somehow, they'd discovered it. Additionally, Edwin continued, you failed to properly document client meetings and development strategies, creating a single point of failure that puts the company at risk. The irony was staggering. He deliberately prevented me from documenting my work, then weaponized that lack of documentation against me. Due to these violations, we're terminating your employment effective immediately. Edwin pushed another document forward. This severance agreement offers 2 weeks' pay in exchange for a clean separation and non-compete clause. I glanced at the agreement without touching it. 2 weeks? After 5 years? Given the circumstances, that's generous, Trent interjected. We could pursue damages for the Diamante account. What damages? I asked. They haven't signed with anyone yet. We had a reasonable expectation. Stop. I held up my hand. I know what this is. Edwin leaned back. Please, enlighten us. This is panic. You recognized Vivian Diamante from your previous failure and realized she might remember you. So you sabotaged the presentation to prevent that connection, then blamed me when it backfired. I met his gaze. How am I doing so far? A muscle twitched in Edwin's jaw. The problem is, I continued, she did remember you. She told me your rigid approach cost them months of market positioning. That's why they terminated your contract early in Chicago. Edwin's face paled. You've been discussing company business. I've been having conversations about my future, I interrupted, which no longer includes this company. I reached into my bag and placed a letter on the desk. This is my resignation, effective immediately. Edwin recovered quickly. Resignation doesn't negate your non-compete clause. You won't be working for any competitors for at least 12 months. Actually, I smiled for the first time. Check clause 17B in my original employment contract. The non-compete only applies if I'm terminated for cause or accept severance. Neither condition has been met. Trent grabbed my personnel file, flipping pages frantically. His expression confirmed I was right. You can't just walk out, Edwin said. The transition isn't my concern anymore. You've been removing me from projects for weeks. Consider that my transition period. I headed for the door. Goodbye, Edwin. You'll never work in this industry again, he called after me. I'll make sure of it. I paused in the doorway. We'll see. As I walked through the office, colleagues watched in silence. Only Zoe met my eyes, giving an almost imperceptible nod. I'd texted her, Sunday night, thank you for everything. Moving on to better things. Outside, I called Vivian. I've made my decision, I said when she answered. I'm listening. I accept your offer with one condition. I need 2 weeks before starting. May I ask why? There's something I need to finish first. A pause. Agreed. 2 weeks, then you're mine. Should I be concerned about what you're finishing? No, I said. It's just tying up loose ends. Those 2 weeks were the calm before the storm. I spent them methodically gathering information, making connections, and preparing for what came next. I visited former clients who'd left during Edwin's tenure, asking open-ended questions about their experience. I reconnected with former colleagues who'd been pushed out. I researched companies Edwin had worked for previously, finding patterns I'd missed before. Meanwhile, Edwin was scrambling. Without access to my development notes or relationship history with Diamante, he struggled to reconstruct my approach. Twice, he attempted to contact me about transition details. I didn't respond. On my last free day before starting at Diamante, I received a text from Zoe. He's presenting to the board tomorrow, claiming credit for revitalizing the Diamante opportunity after rescuing it from mismanagement. I replied, perfect timing. The next morning, I walked into Diamante headquarters as their new director of strategic solutions. Vivian introduced me to the executive team, then led me to a conference room where 6 people waited, including the board members from my previous company. Miss Wade, the chairman said, your timing is impeccable. We were just discussing the concerning pattern Miss Diamante brought to our attention. For 2 hours, I listened as Vivian methodically outlined what she'd discovered about Edwin's management history. Not just his failures at my former company, but a consistent pattern across 3 previous employers. Client loss, team turnover, taking credit for others' work while blaming them for failures. This morning, Vivian concluded, your senior director is presenting to your board, claiming he salvaged the Diamante account. Meanwhile, we're signing a multi-year contract with the person he terminated. The chairman looked grim. We appreciate this information. Rest assured, appropriate action will be taken. As the meeting concluded, Vivian pulled me aside. You orchestrated this, didn't you? The timing, the board meeting. All of it. I simply connected people who needed to talk to each other. Her eyes narrowed. You're more strategic than I realized. I'm glad you're on my team now. That afternoon, Zoe texted again. Board meeting interrupted. Edwin called out. Emergency executive session in progress. I didn't reply. There was nothing more to say. 3 days later, a press release announced Edwin's departure from the company to pursue other opportunities. An internal investigation into management practices was launched. Former employees were contacted for interviews about their experiences. 2 weeks after that, I received an email from the chairman asking if I would consider returning to lead a newly restructured division. I politely declined. 6 months passed. I thrived at Diamante, developing the cultural context model that would eventually become our flagship product. My team expanded. My ideas flourished under Vivian's mentorship. Then came the industry conference in Atlanta, the one where everyone who matters attends. I was scheduled to present our new platform, now generating substantial revenue. As I prepared in the speaker room, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Edwin looked different. Cheaper suit, cheaper watch, the confident posture gone. He'd aged years in months. Harper, he said, congratulations on your success. I regarded him coolly. What do you want, Edwin? I've been consulting independently since the change. He cleared his throat. It's been challenging to rebuild. I imagine so. I wondered if we might clear the air, perhaps discuss potential collaboration opportunities. And there it was, the real reason for this unexpected reunion. Edwin hadn't changed. He'd simply identified me as a potential ladder to climb again. There's nothing to discuss, I said. You tried to destroy my career because I challenged your ideas. You failed because your ideas deserved to be challenged. His expression hardened. You planned this from the beginning. You used Diamante to take me down. No, Edwin, you took yourself down. I simply stepped out of the way and let people see the truth. The truth? He laughed bitterly. The truth is you got lucky. If Vivian hadn't taken a shine to you, it wasn't luck, I interrupted. It was preparation meeting opportunity, something you never understood. A staff member appeared. Miss Wade, you're on in 5 minutes. Edwin blocked my path. This isn't over. Actually, it is. I stepped around him. I have a presentation to give. One I've had more than 2 minutes to prepare for. As I walked onto the stage to applause, I spotted Edwin slinking toward the exit. He wouldn't stay to watch me succeed. He couldn't bear it. My revenge wasn't the dramatic confrontation he'd expected. It wasn't crafted in anger or executed in a moment of triumph. It was methodical, patient, and devastatingly simple. I connected the dots he'd spent years trying to hide. I let his pattern of behavior speak for itself. I gave his victims voices they'd been denied. I didn't destroy Edwin Palmer. I merely removed the facades he'd built, allowing everyone to see what had always been there. And that was a far more complete destruction than he could ever comprehend. If this story of professional resilience and strategic patience resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about navigating challenging workplace dynamics. Have you ever faced a similar situation where someone tried to sabotage your success? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you handled it. You'll still work on it. Nothing changes operationally. This is just paperwork. Those were the words that echoed in my head when I realized they were about to take everything. My boss and his son sat there, waiting for me to hand over 3 years of my life, written in 6 pages of legal language. The water treatment innovation I built from nothing. The system that was already saving the plant hundreds of thousands in disposal fees. About to become the property of a 24-year-old who probably thought filtration was something you did to coffee. But what choice did I have? You either sign when powerful people tell you to sign, or you lose everything you fought to build. Before I go any further, I need to say thank you for being here and listening to what happened to me. If this resonates with you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me your thoughts. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about what happens when people underestimate the quiet ones. Now, let me tell you how I got to that moment, because it started long before that piece of paper appeared in front of me. My name is Bree, and 5 years before that meeting, I was sleeping on my sister's sofa with 2 engineering degrees and debt that felt like it would bury me alive. I'd sent out 200 applications and gotten 3 interviews. The manufacturing plant hired me to do basic maintenance on their wastewater treatment systems, keep the pumps running, make sure the inspectors stayed happy. Entry-level work that barely covered my rent once I finally moved into my own tiny apartment. But I'm the kind of person who notices things. Details other people walk past every day without seeing. The plant was dumping thousands of gallons of contaminated water daily, paying enormous fees to have it hauled away, while simultaneously buying clean water for the cooling systems and industrial processes. It was backwards, wasteful, expensive. During my lunch breaks, I started sketching out ideas in my notebook. What if we could treat the wastewater to a level where it could be reused internally? Not for drinking, obviously, but for manufacturing operations where ultra-pure water wasn't necessary. I began running small tests after my regular shift ended, adjusting chemical ratios, testing different filtration sequences, using equipment we already had, just in different configurations. 6 months into my experiments, I had something that worked, not perfectly, but well enough to run a pilot program in one section of the plant. The water bills for that section dropped by 18% in the first month. By month 3, it was down 30%. That's when my supervisor noticed. He brought it to the attention of the executive VP, a man named Graydon, who'd been with the company for 22 years and knew every way to squeeze profit from operations. Graydon called me into his office on a Tuesday morning. I remember because I'd never been called to the executive floor before, and I wore the one professional blazer I owned that didn't have a loose button. "This is impressive work," Graydon said, flipping through my documentation. "Really impressive. You've basically created a closed-loop system with equipment we already own. The cost savings potential is massive." I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride, recognition, the sense that maybe I hadn't wasted all that time in graduate school after all. "We need to protect this," he continued. "Patent it, scale it to the whole facility, maybe even license it to other plants." I nodded, already imagining what a promotion might look like. Maybe a title change, a raise, my own project team. Then Graydon said the words that should have warned me what was coming. "My son Kellum just graduated from business school. He's been looking for the right project to cut his teeth on, something with real market potential. He's got the business acumen to really take this to the next level." My pride didn't just deflate. It shattered into something that felt like glass in my chest. Kellum started appearing at my presentations to management. He'd sit in the back, scrolling through his phone, occasionally asking questions that made it obvious he didn't understand the first thing about fluid dynamics or chemical engineering. But he took notes, pages and pages of notes, and slowly, meeting by meeting, he started moving forward in the room, back row, middle row, eventually sitting right next to Graydon, at the head of the table. 4 months after that first meeting with Graydon, Kellum started referring to the project as our system in emails, then the system we developed, then just my system. I told myself it was just corporate politics, that my work would speak for itself, that as long as I kept improving the technology, kept documenting everything, kept making the numbers better, I'd be protected. I was wrong. The meeting happened on a Thursday afternoon. Graydon's assistant called me at 3 p.m. and told me to come to the executive floor immediately. When I walked into the room, Graydon sat on one side of the table, Kellum on the other. Between them sat a stack of papers. "Bree, thanks for coming up," Graydon began. "We're restructuring the intellectual property ownership for the water treatment system. Legal advised us that for tax purposes and liability protection, the IP needs to be held under the correct corporate umbrella." He pushed the papers toward me. I could see Intellectual Property Transfer Agreement printed at the top. "You'll still work on it," Graydon added quickly. "Nothing changes operationally. This is just paperwork, administrative stuff." But I'd heard stories. Engineers who signed over their patents and then 6 months later found themselves pushed out. Suddenly their services weren't needed anymore. Suddenly they were causing problems. Suddenly they were let go in budget cuts that somehow didn't affect anyone else. "I'd like some time to review this," I said, trying to keep my voice level. Kellum leaned forward, and I saw that expression again. That smirk that said he'd never had to fight for anything and never would. "There's no time. The patent filing deadline is Monday. If you don't sign today, we miss the window. And if we miss the window," he shrugged, "someone else might beat us to it. Then this whole thing becomes worthless. Along with your position here." The threat hung there between us, unspoken but crystal clear. Sign this or lose your job. Sign this or lose everything. Graydon's voice came again, quieter this time but somehow harder. Sign this or you're done. My apartment, my car, the life I'd barely managed to build. It all depended on this job, on staying in Graydon's good graces, on not making waves. So I picked up the pen, but I didn't sign immediately. Instead, I started reading. Every single word, every clause, every subclause. Graydon kept checking his watch. Kellum went back to his phone. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then 40. The language was dense, full of legal terminology designed to confuse non-lawyers. But I'd taken enough technical writing courses to understand how sentences were structured, how meaning was built. And in the third paragraph, I found something interesting. The document read, "Employee hereby grants, assigns, and transfers all rights, title, and interest in the aforementioned intellectual property to the designated recipient, including but not limited to all patents, trade secrets, and derivative works." One word, two. Such a small word, 2 letters, but it determined the entire direction of the transfer. It determined who was giving and who was receiving. I thought about what would happen if I didn't sign. I'd be fired, blackballed, unable to get another engineering job in this industry because Graydon had connections everywhere. I thought about going back to my sister's sofa, about the debt collectors who were finally starting to leave me alone, about starting over at 29 years old with nothing to show for my education, except loans I'd be paying off until I was 50. Then, I thought about Kellum giving speeches about his innovation, about his name on patents for work he'd never done, about him building a career on my ideas while I struggled to find another entry-level position. I pulled out my pen and made one small change. I crossed out "to" and wrote "from" directly above it in neat, clear handwriting. The sentence now read, "Employee hereby grants, assigns, and transfers all rights, title, and interest in the aforementioned intellectual property from the designated recipient, including but not limited to all patents, trade secrets, and derivative works." I initialed the change, just like you're supposed to do with contract modifications. Then I signed at the bottom, dated it, pushed it back toward Graydon. He barely looked at it, just flipped to the signature page, verified my name was there, and filed it in the folder. "Smart move," he said. I walked out of that office with my heart beating so hard I thought my ribs might crack. I'd just changed a legally binding document, but they'd signed it too, both of them. Graydon and Kellum had both added their signatures below mine, making the modified contract official. For 6 weeks, nothing happened. Kellum started doing press interviews. Industry publications ran articles about the young innovator revolutionizing industrial water treatment. He gave a keynote speech at a regional manufacturing conference. He appeared on a podcast about entrepreneurs under 30. In every interview, every speech, every appearance, he talked about his vision and his system and his breakthrough approach. I kept showing up to work. I kept running the systems. I kept my head down and my mouth shut. Other engineers would ask me questions about the technology. Then Kellum would take credit for the answers in meetings. Management started routing technical questions through him, even though he'd then turn around and ask me to actually solve the problems. I watched my creation get stolen piece by piece, and I said nothing. Then, exactly 6 weeks and 2 days after I signed that contract, my phone started ringing. The company's corporate attorney. I didn't answer. She called again, and again, 14 times, in 1 hour. Each voicemail more urgent than the last. "Bree, this is urgent. Call me back immediately. Bree, we need to discuss the IP transfer agreement. Call me back. Bree, there's been a serious legal issue. You need to contact me right now." I didn't call back. The next morning, I arrived at work to find 2 federal marshals in the facility manager's office. They weren't there for me. They were there for the documentation. All of it. Every file related to the water treatment system. Every prototype. Every schematic. Every email. Every technical report. The facility manager looked like he might pass out. "On what grounds?" he kept asking. "Federal investigation into intellectual property fraud," one of the marshals said, loading boxes onto a cart. I stood in the hallway and watched them work. Other engineers gathered around, whispering. Nobody understood what was happening. I did, but I kept my expression neutral, confused, like everyone else. Graydon arrived 30 minutes later, his face red, his tie loosened. He went straight into the manager's office and shut the door. Through the window, I could see him on his phone, pacing back and forth. His free hand kept running through his hair, making it stand up in odd directions. Kellum showed up next, still wearing gym clothes like he'd been pulled from a workout. He tried to go into the office, but the marshals stopped him. I heard one of them say, "Sir, you need to wait outside." "Do you know who I am?" Kellum said, his voice rising. "My father is executive VP of this facility. That's my technology they're confiscating." The marshal's expression didn't change. "Sir, wait outside." I went back to my workspace. I had actual work to do, systems to maintain. The water treatment operation didn't stop just because federal agents were boxing up paperwork. I checked flow rates, adjusted chemical feeds, documented pressure readings. Normal day, normal tasks. Except my phone kept buzzing in my pocket. The corporate attorney. I let it go to voicemail every time. By afternoon, word had spread through the entire facility. Federal investigation. Intellectual property fraud. Everyone had theories. Someone said Kellum had stolen designs from a competitor. Someone else said the patents were filed incorrectly. Another person thought it was about environmental violations. Nobody suspected the truth. At 4 p.m., the facility manager sent out an email. All personnel were to continue normal operations. The investigation was unrelated to daily plant activities. Anyone contacted by federal agents or attorneys should immediately report it to Human Resources. I deleted the email. That evening, I went home to my apartment and made dinner like I did every Thursday. Pasta with vegetables. Nothing fancy. I ate while watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures. I did my dishes. I went to bed at 10:30. My phone had 23 missed calls by then. The next morning, Friday, I arrived at work to find Graydon's office empty. His assistant said he'd taken a personal day. "First one in 7 years," she added, her voice tinged with worry. Kellum was there, though. I saw him in the hallway outside the legal department, talking intensely with two people in suits. Attorneys, probably. His voice carried down the corridor. "There has to be a mistake. Run the paperwork again. Check the signatures. Check everything." I walked past without looking at him. I had a meeting with the maintenance crew about upgrading some filtration housings. We spent 2 hours going over specifications and installation timelines. Normal work. Normal Friday. At lunch, I sat in the break room with some of the other engineers. They were still talking about the investigation. "I heard they seized everything," one of them said. "Every document with Kellum's name on it. Makes sense," another replied. "He's been taking credit for work he didn't do. Maybe someone finally reported it." I ate my sandwich and said nothing. "Bree, you worked on that water system," someone said to me. "Do you know what's going on?" I shook my head. "No idea. I just keep the equipment running." It was the truth, in a way. I didn't know exactly what was going on in the legal proceedings. I knew what I'd done, but I didn't know how it was playing out in federal offices and attorney conferences. The corporate lawyer finally caught me in person, Friday afternoon. She appeared at my workspace, with a folder under her arm and an expression that somehow managed to be both furious and desperately controlled. "We need to talk," she said. "Now." She led me to a small meeting room on the second floor. Just her, me, and that folder. "Do you remember signing an intellectual property transfer agreement 6 weeks ago?" she asked. "Yes." "Do you remember making any changes to that agreement?" I met her eyes. "Yes." She opened the folder and pulled out a copy of the contract. My modification was there in black ink. "From," written clearly above the crossed-out "to." "Walk me through your thinking here," she said, her voice very calm. Too calm. "I read the contract before signing it," I said. "I made a modification. I initialed the change. Then I signed. Graydon and Kellum signed after me, accepting the modification. That makes it a binding contract. You changed the fundamental meaning of the entire document. I changed one word. You reversed the direction of the IP transfer." "Yes." She sat back in her chair, studying me. "Do you understand what you've done?" I signed a contract. So did they. The contract now states that Kellum was transferring intellectual property to you, but Kellum never owned any intellectual property. He never invented anything, which means he signed a document claiming to transfer IP he didn't possess. That's fraud. I said nothing. Every patent application filed under his name in the past 6 weeks, every licensing agreement, every investor presentation, all of it is based on IP he fraudulently claimed to own. IP that, according to this signed contract, he was simultaneously acknowledging belonged to you. I kept my expression blank, confused, like I didn't understand the implications. The federal government takes IP fraud very seriously, she continued, especially when venture capital is involved. Kellum has been courting investors, telling them he owns revolutionary water treatment technology. He's taken preliminary investment money, but he doesn't own it. He never did. And this contract proves he knew it. I just changed one word, I said quietly. She leaned forward. Did you know what you were doing when you made that change? I thought about how to answer. The truth was complicated. Yes, I knew I was reversing the transfer. Yes, I knew it would create problems if anyone actually read the document. But did I know it would lead to federal charges? Did I know it would unravel everything Kellum had built in 6 weeks? Did I predict federal marshals and seize documents and fraud investigations? I knew I was changing the contract, I said finally. I thought if they read it and still signed it, then that's what they wanted. They didn't read it. That's not my fault. The lawyer stared at me for a long moment. Then she closed the folder. The company is in a very difficult position. Graydon and Kellum signed a legally binding document that contradicts their subsequent actions. The patent office is involved. The SEC is involved because of the investor money. Our liability, exposure is significant. What do you want from me? We want to know what you want. The question hung there between us. What did I want? My job? My reputation? Money? All of the above? I want what's mine, I said, which is the water treatment system, the patents, the recognition for the work I actually did. She nodded slowly. And if the company agrees to transfer all IP rights to you, will you cooperate with resolving the legal complications? What happens to Kellum? That's between him and federal prosecutors. The company can't control that. And Graydon? He'll be asked to resign. I thought about Graydon in his office that first day, telling me how impressive my work was, then immediately plotting to give it to his son. I thought about every meeting where Kellum took credit for my ideas, every interview where he called himself an innovator, every presentation where he butchered technical concepts I'd spent years developing. I'll cooperate, I said. The lawyer left. I went back to my workspace. The facility kept operating. Water kept flowing through the systems I'd designed. The treatment process I'd invented kept running, kept saving the company money, kept proving my work was valuable. That weekend, I didn't leave my apartment. I half expected federal agents to show up at my door, but they never came. I half expected the company to fire me, but Monday morning my badge still worked, and my paycheck still deposited. Kellum didn't come back to work. Graydon's office stayed empty. The assistant started packing up his personal items on Tuesday, carefully placing family photos and awards into cardboard boxes. Rumors flew through the facility like wildfire. Graydon was being investigated. Kellum was facing criminal charges. The company was doing damage control with investors. The water treatment patents were in legal limbo. Nobody connected any of it to me. Why would they? I was just the junior engineer who maintained the systems. I kept my head down, did my work, stayed quiet. On Wednesday, the corporate lawyer called me into another meeting. This time, she had 3 other attorneys with her and a stack of documents that looked substantially thicker than the original transfer agreement. We've prepared a settlement offer, she said. Full IP rights transfer to you. The company will license the technology from you at agreed-upon rates. We'll handle the patent corrections with the federal office. In exchange, you agree not to sue the company for the attempted theft. I read every word, every clause, every subclause. It took me 3 hours. The attorneys waited. The terms were generous, more than generous. The licensing fees alone would set me up for life. The patents would be entirely mine. My name would replace Kellum's on every application. The company would publicly acknowledge my work. There's one more thing, the lawyer said, when I finished reading. Kellum's attorney is claiming the contract. Modification was done after he and Graydon signed. That you changed to from after the fact to frame him for fraud. I looked up from the papers. That's not true. Can you prove it? The contract has 3 signatures. Mine is first, then Graydon's, then Kellum's. all dated the same day. If I'd modified it after they signed, their signatures would have been made before the modification existed. But their signatures are below mine, which means they signed after I made the change. They accepted the modified contract. The lawyer smiled slightly. That's what our analysis concluded too. But Kellam's attorney is pushing hard on this defense. They're claiming you're some kind of mastermind who manipulated the situation. I just changed one word. One word that might send someone to federal prison. I signed the settlement agreement, all of it, every page. When I left that meeting, I owned something for the first time in my life, really owned it. Not just possession, but legal, documented, federal government recognized ownership. The water treatment system was mine. The patents would be mine. The future royalties would be mine. I went back to work. I checked flow rates. I adjusted chemical feeds. I documented pressure readings. Normal day, normal tasks, except everything had changed. 3 weeks later, Graydon's resignation was announced in a company-wide email. After 22 years of service, he was pursuing other opportunities. The email thanked him for his contributions and wished him well. No mention of investigations, no mention of his son, just corporate language that said everything by saying nothing. I saw him one more time. He was leaving the building with the last of his personal items, a security guard escorting him to his vehicle. Our paths crossed near the main entrance. He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time since I'd started working there. "You knew," he said. Not a question, a statement. I changed one word, I replied. "You destroyed my son's future. Your son tried to steal 3 years of my work." I just read the contract before signing it. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say more, but the security guard touched his elbow. "Time to go." Graydon walked out of the building, and I never saw him again. The patents were refiled with my name as sole inventor. The process took 4 months of bureaucratic paperwork, but eventually, official documents arrived with federal seals and my name printed in bold text. I kept them in a fireproof safe in my apartment. The facility continued licensing my technology. Every quarter, royalty payments deposited into my account. Not enough to quit working, not at first, but enough to pay off my student loans completely. Enough to start saving real money for the first time in my adult life. Other manufacturing plants started reaching out. They'd heard about the water treatment system. Could they license it too? Could I consult on implementation? Could I design custom variations for their specific needs? I hired an attorney to handle the licensing agreements. Then I hired an accountant to manage the money. 6 months after signing that settlement, I was making more from royalties than from my salary at the plant. But I kept showing up to work. Every day, same schedule, same tasks, because I actually liked the work. I liked seeing the systems operate. I liked solving problems. I liked knowing I'd built something that functioned, that mattered, that saved resources and money, and made industrial processes cleaner. Kellam's criminal trial was set for 9 months after the initial investigation. Federal prosecutors charged him with wire fraud, investor fraud, and intellectual property theft. The case was public record, covered in business journals and legal publications. His attorneys tried everything. They claimed the contract modification was done after the signatures. They claimed I'd manipulated him. They claimed he'd been acting in good faith based on his father's instructions. None of it worked. The forensic document analysis proved the modification happened before the final signatures. The email records proved Kellam knew I'd designed the system. His own presentation materials proved he didn't understand the technology he was claiming to have invented. I was called to testify. I wore a plain suit and answered every question directly. Yes, I designed the water treatment system. Yes, I modified the contract. Yes, I initialed the change before signing. Yes, Graydon and Kellam signed after me. Kellam's attorney tried to make me look like a schemer. "Isn't it true you deliberately deceived my client?" "No. I made a visible change to a legal document and initialed it clearly. Both parties who signed after me accepted that change. You knew they wouldn't read the modification. I don't know what other people read or don't read. I only know what I read. You intended to trap my client. I intended to protect my work." The jury found him guilty on all counts. Sentencing was set for 2 months later. I didn't attend that hearing, but the news articles reported he received 18 months in federal prison and was ordered to pay restitution to the investors he'd defrauded. Graydon faced civil lawsuits, but no criminal charges. His attorneys argued he'd been trying to protect company IP, not commit fraud. He settled with investors privately. Word through the industry network was that he'd lost most of his retirement savings in the settlements. I didn't feel good about it, but I didn't feel bad either. They'd tried to take everything from me, and there were consequences for that, real consequences. The facility promoted me to senior engineer 14 months after everything started. My own project team, my own budget, my own office with windows that looked out over the treatment systems I'd designed. I kept improving the technology, new filtration methods, better chemical processes, ways to handle different types of industrial wastewater. Each improvement meant new patents, with my name on them. Each patent meant more licensing opportunities. 2 years after that meeting where Graydon told me to sign or lose everything, I bought a house. Not huge, but mine. 3 bedrooms, a garden where I could grow vegetables, windows in every room that let in natural light. I paid cash. My sister came to visit the week I moved in. We sat in the kitchen drinking coffee while movers brought in furniture. "Remember when I was sleeping on your sofa?" I said. She laughed. "You were so stressed back then, sending out applications every day, never hearing back. I thought I'd wasted all that time in graduate school. All that debt for nothing. Look at you now." I looked around the kitchen, my kitchen, in my house, paid for with royalties from patents bearing my name. It's weird how everything worked out. It's not weird. You're brilliant. You always were. I just read contracts carefully. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe my modesty, but she didn't push it. Work continued. Plants across the region licensed my system. Then plants in other states. Then international facilities. My technology was processing industrial wastewater in 7 countries within 3 years. Every installation generated royalty payments. Every payment went into investments my accountant managed. I quit my job at the original facility 4 years after the settlement, not because I was angry or bitter, but because I had more consulting work than I could handle, while still maintaining a full-time position. The facility manager understood. They kept licensing my technology. We stayed on good terms. I opened my own consulting firm. Small operation. Just me and 2 other engineers I hired to help with installations and training. We worked with manufacturing plants to implement customized water treatment solutions. Business was good, better than good. 5 years after signing that modified contract, I had 11 patents, licensing agreements with 43 facilities across 9 countries, and enough money that I'd never have to worry about rent or debt or losing everything again. I thought about Kellum sometimes. He'd served his prison time and gotten out. I wondered what he was doing, whether he'd learned anything, whether he understood that stealing other people's work had real consequences. Then, 6 years after everything started, I found out. I was traveling for a consulting project in a city 3 hours from where I lived. The installation was taking longer than expected, so I needed to rent a vehicle to get to another client meeting across town. I walked into the rental location, gave my name to the person at the counter, and waited while they processed the paperwork. The employee came back with a key fob and a rental agreement. "Sign here," he said, sliding the paper toward me. I looked up. Kellum. He was wearing a company polo shirt with a name tag. His hair was shorter than I remembered. He looked tired, older than 29, even though that's what he would be now. Prison does that, I'd heard. Ages you in ways that have nothing to do with time. He didn't recognize me. Not at first. I was wearing professional clothes, carrying a leather portfolio, looking nothing like the junior engineer who used to maintain equipment in a plant where his father worked. I picked up the rental agreement and started reading. Every word, every clause. Kellum shifted his weight, waiting. Other customers lined up behind me. "Ma'am, it's just a standard rental contract," he said. "If you're in a hurry, it's the same one everyone signs." I kept reading. Insurance provisions, mileage limits, fuel policies, damage waivers. "Ma'am?" I looked up at him again. Our eyes met. I saw the moment recognition hit. His face went pale. His hand on the counter started shaking slightly. "Bree," he said quietly. "Kellum." The customers behind me were getting impatient. Someone muttered about the wait. Kellum glanced at them, then back at me. "I need to process other customers," he said. "If you don't want to rent the vehicle." I'm still reading. He stood there, trapped. He couldn't leave his post, couldn't refuse to serve me. Couldn't do anything except wait while I read every single word of a standard rental agreement that I could have signed in 30 seconds. I took my time. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Finally, I signed at the bottom, pushed the paper back to him. His hand shook when he took it. "Smart move," I said. He flinched, like I'd slapped him. I took the key fob and walked out to find my rental vehicle. A nice sedan, clean, well-maintained. I adjusted the mirrors, connected my phone to the Bluetooth, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see the rental location getting smaller. Somewhere inside, Kellum was probably processing the next customer, handing over keys, explaining insurance options, living the life he'd built after losing everything he'd tried to steal. I drove to my client meeting. We discussed implementing my water treatment system in their facility. They wanted the full installation, the premium package, with ongoing consulting support. The contract was worth more than I used to make in 3 years at the plant. I read every word before signing. That night, in my hotel room, I thought about power, real power, not the kind Graydon had, the kind that comes from a title and a position and knowing the right people. That power was temporary, fragile. One investigation, one legal problem, one son's fraud case, and it evaporated. Real power was different. Real power was owning something nobody could take from you. Patents with your name on them, knowledge in your head, skills you'd spent years developing. That power stayed with you. That power grew. I fell asleep thinking about the next project, a new filtration method I'd been developing, something that could handle pharmaceutical wastewater, which was notoriously difficult to treat. If I could solve that problem, the market would be massive. Thank you for staying with me through this whole story. If you found this worthwhile, please hit that like button and leave a comment sharing your thoughts about what happened. Subscribe if you want to hear more about what happens when people underestimate the quiet ones who actually do the work.